school nurse found strange bruises on a 7-year-old boy's back and asked him what had happened. When he told her who had done this to him, she called 911 immediately. Eleanor Morris had worked as the school nurse at Pinewood Elementary for 23 years, long enough to recognize the subtle shift in seasons by the changing parade of ailments that marched through her office door. September brought the nervous stomachaches of new students. October ushered in the first wave of colds. By January, she'd be knee-deep in flu cases, and spring inevitably delivered playground scrapes and seasonal allergies. But in all those years, she'd also developed another skill: recognizing when a child's pain came from somewhere other than illness or accident. Rain pattered against the windows of her small office, casting gray shadows across the examination table where 7-year-old Ethan Wheeler sat, his legs dangling over the edge, not quite reaching the floor. His mousy brown hair needed a trim, falling into eyes that seemed too solemn for a child his age. Eleanor had noticed the change in him over the past several months. A dimming, like someone had slowly turned down the brightness on a once vibrant screen. "So, this stomachache," Eleanor said gently. "Can you show me where it hurts?" Ethan pointed vaguely to his midsection, his gaze fixed on the cartoon fish swimming across his sneakers. They were scuffed and slightly small for his feet. "And when did it start hurting?" she asked, warming her hands before placing them lightly on his abdomen. "This morning," he mumbled. "Before school. Did you eat breakfast?" A slight hesitation. "No." Eleanor kept her expression neutral even as she noted the detail. It was the third time this month Ethan had come to her with a stomachache, and the third time he'd mentioned not eating breakfast. "Any chance you might just be hungry, buddy?" she asked. He shrugged one thin shoulder beneath his faded blue t-shirt. "Let me check your temperature, just to be sure there's no fever." She reached for the digital thermometer, noticing how Ethan's body tensed slightly at her movement. Another note in her mental file. As she placed the thermometer in his ear, Ethan shifted, and his shirt rode up slightly in the back. A dark discoloration caught Eleanor's eye, a shadow that didn't belong on a child's skin. She paused, careful to keep her movements casual as the thermometer beeped. 98.6, she announced. "Perfect normal." Setting the thermometer aside, she made a quick decision. "Ethan, would you mind if I check your back? Sometimes stomachaches can come from muscles that are sore or tight." His eyes flashed to hers for the first time, wary, assessing. "Why?" "Just to be thorough," she said, keeping her tone light. "I want to make sure I'm not missing anything that might be making you feel bad." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, the movement almost imperceptible. "Great. Can you lift your shirt up in the back for me? Or I can help you, if you'd like." "I can do it," he said softly, turning slightly and raising the back of his shirt with obvious reluctance. Eleanor had prepared herself for what she might see, but the reality still sent a cold wash of dread through her chest. Multiple bruises marked his small back, some fresh and darkly purple, others fading to sickly yellow-green. They weren't the random marks of a child at play. Some bore the distinct pattern of fingerprints. Others had the linear quality of impacts from an object. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, careful to keep her voice steady. "You can put your shirt down now." He quickly tugged the fabric back into place, hunching forward slightly as if trying to make himself smaller. Eleanor moved to sit on her rolling stool, bringing herself to eye level with him. "Ethan, I notice you have some bruises on your back. Can you tell me how they got there?" His gaze dropped back to his shoes. The cartoon fish suddenly seemed to demand his complete attention. "You're not in any trouble," she assured him softly. "I just need to know so I can help." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that stretched between them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the window. Eleanor waited, having learned long ago that rushing children only made them retreat further. "I fell," he finally said, the words barely audible. Eleanor nodded, not in acceptance but in acknowledgement. "That must have hurt. It looks like you fell more than once." Ethan's fingers twisted in the hem of his shirt. "I fall a lot." "I see." She kept her tone conversational. "The bruises look like they might have been made by something or Someone. Did somebody hurt you, Ethan? His breathing quickened, shallow and uneven. A tear slipped down his cheek, followed by another. He brushed them away roughly with the back of his hand. Ethan, she said gently, part of my job is making sure kids are safe, not just at school, but everywhere. If someone is hurting you, I need to know so I can help make it stop. You won't be in trouble for telling me the truth. His shoulders trembled with the effort of holding back sobs. The fish on his sneakers blurred through his tears. She gets mad, he finally whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. When I do things wrong, or when she has her headaches. Eleanor felt her heart constrict. Who gets mad, Ethan? Another long silence. Mom, he said, then quickly corrected himself. Not my real mom. Vanessa. My stepmom. And what happens when Vanessa gets mad? He wrapped his arms around himself. Sometimes she yells. Sometimes she grabs me really hard. Or she uses her belt. His voice dropped even lower. One time she pushed me against the wall. I hit my head. Each word felt like a stone dropping into Eleanor's stomach. She'd had this conversation before with other children over her long career, but it never got easier. Does your dad know this happens? Ethan shook his head vehemently. Dad's working a lot. He doesn't see. And Vanessa says he has enough to worry about. His eyes suddenly widened with panic. You can't tell him. Please. He'll be sad. And Vanessa says we can't make him sad because of Mom dying. Eleanor took a measured breath. Ethan, when adults hurt children, it's not the child's fault. Ever. No matter what they say. And there are other adults whose job it is to make sure kids are safe. She says nobody will believe me, he whispered. That I'm a liar. I believe you, Eleanor said firmly. And I promise you, I'm going to help. Tears spilled freely down his face now. I don't want to go home, he admitted, the words seeming to surprise even him as they came out. I know this is scary, Eleanor said, fighting to keep her own emotions in check. But you've been very brave telling me the truth. Would it be okay if I take some pictures of the bruises? Just so we have a record of them? After another hesitant nod from Ethan, Eleanor took out the camera she kept locked in her desk for such situations. A camera she wished she never had to use. With clinical efficiency, she documented the injuries, each click of the shutter capturing evidence of failures. A family's, a community's, a system's. You're being very brave, she repeated as she put the camera away. Now, I need to make a phone call, but I'm not going to leave you alone. Okay? Ethan's face paled. Who are you calling? There are special police officers whose only job is to help kids who are being hurt, she explained. I need to call them because that's what the law says I have to do when a child isn't safe. His breathing quickened again, panic flashing in his eyes. She'll know I told. She'll be so mad. You won't have to face her alone, Eleanor promised. The police and other adults will make sure you're safe. She reached for the phone on her desk, dialing the direct number for the local police department's Special Victims Unit. As it rang, she kept her eyes on Ethan, who sat rigid with fear. Detective Donovan, came the crisp answer. Claire, it's Eleanor Morris at Pinewood Elementary, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. I need to report suspected child abuse. I have a 7-year-old boy with significant bruising consistent with physical assault. He's disclosed that his stepmother is the perpetrator. She listened to the detective's response, nodding. Yes, we'll stay right here. Thank you. She hung up and turned back to Ethan. They're sending someone right away. Would you like a juice or a snack while we wait? I think I have some crackers. Ethan shook his head. Am I going home today? He asked, dread evident in his voice. I don't know for sure, Eleanor answered honestly. But what I do know is that you won't be going anywhere unsafe. A knock at the office door made them both jump. Eleanor stood and opened it to find Sarah Bennett, Ethan's second-grade teacher, concern etched across her face. Everything okay? Sarah asked. Ethan's been gone a while, and I just wanted to check. Eleanor stepped into the hallway, partially closing the door behind her. I've called SVU, she said quietly. Ethan has disclosed physical abuse by his stepmother. There's significant bruising. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, she breathed. I knew something was off. He's been so withdrawn lately, and his homework's been suffering. Last week he fell asleep in class. Her eyes filled with tears. I should have said something sooner. You couldn't have known, Eleanor said, though they both recognized the hollow comfort of the words. What can I do? Could you gather any schoolwork he might need for a few days? And maybe his coat and backpack? I don't think he'll be returning to class today. Sarah nodded quickly. Of course. She hesitated. Should I tell the other students anything? Just that Ethan wasn't feeling well and went home. The less attention drawn to this right now, the better. As Sarah hurried back to her classroom, Eleanor returned to Ethan, who had barely moved on the examination table. That was your teacher, she explained. She's getting your things for you. He nodded mutely. Ethan, do you want to tell me about your dad? She asked, wanting to keep him talking, to understand more about his home situation. Dad's nice, he said immediately. He doesn't hurt me. He's not home a lot. He fixes houses for people, even ones that are far away. Sometimes he has to stay overnight at the jobs. And it's just you, your dad, and Vanessa at home? He nodded. Since my real mom died. She had cancer, he added, as if reciting a fact he'd been told but didn't fully comprehend. That was 2 years ago. Eleanor made a mental note of the timeline. And when did Vanessa come to live with you? After Mom died. Dad was sad all the time. Then he met Vanessa at his work. She picked out kitchen stuff for the houses he builds. She moved in before they got married. The picture was becoming clearer. A grieving widower, a replacement mother figure, a child caught in the aftermath of loss. Does Vanessa hurt you often? Eleanor asked. Ethan's gaze dropped again. Just when I'm bad. Or when she has bad days. What makes a bad day for Vanessa? When she drinks the special juice that Dad's not supposed to know about. It makes her voice get all funny. Or when she can't sleep and takes too many pills. Eleanor fought to keep her expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. Before she could ask another question, there was another knock at the door, firmer this time. Detective Claire Donovan stood in the hallway, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her expression professionally composed. At 40, she had the steady demeanor that came from years of handling difficult cases, but her eyes held a gentle warmth that put children at ease. Hey, Eleanor, she said, voice low. Thanks for coming so quickly, Eleanor replied, stepping aside to let her in. Claire's gaze immediately went to Ethan, and her face softened. Hi there. You must be Ethan. I'm Detective Claire. Is it okay if I come in and talk with you for a bit? Ethan looked to Eleanor for reassurance. Detective Claire is one of those special police officers I told you about, Eleanor explained. The ones who help kids. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan nodded. Claire entered, taking a seat on the stool Eleanor had vacated. She didn't rush to speak, allowing Ethan time to adjust to her presence. I understand you've had a pretty tough morning, she said finally. Nurse Eleanor tells me you've got some injuries that shouldn't be there. Ethan's eyes welled with fresh tears. Am I in trouble? Absolutely not, Claire assured him. When adults hurt kids, it's never the kid's fault. Never. My job is to make sure you're safe, not to get you in trouble. What about Vanessa? He asked in a small voice. Is she in trouble? Claire chose her words carefully. My job is to figure out exactly what's been happening and make sure it stops. I'll need to talk to Vanessa and to your dad and to you. But right now, the most important thing is making sure you're somewhere safe. Where will I go? Fear crept into his voice again. We have some really nice people who take care of kids temporarily when they need a safe place to stay, Claire explained. They have comfortable homes and usually other kids to play with. Ethan's breath hitched. For how long? I don't know yet, Claire admitted. It depends on what we find out during our investigation. But I promise we'll keep you updated every step of the way. Sarah Bennett returned with Ethan's red backpack and navy blue jacket. Here are his things, she said, handing them to Eleanor. To Ethan, she added, I put your library book in there too, so you can finish it. Thank you, Ms. Bennet, he said automatically, his manners surfacing through his distress. Sarah's eyes glistened. You take care, Ethan. We'll see you soon. After she left, Claire turned back to Ethan. Eleanor told me about the bruises on your back. Would it be okay if I take a look too? It would really help me understand what happened. Ethan looked to Eleanor again, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, Ethan. Detective Claire needs to see so she can help. Reluctantly, Ethan turned and lifted his shirt again, revealing the constellation of bruises that had set the morning's events in motion. Claire maintained her professional demeanor, but Eleanor caught the flash of anger in her eyes. Controlled, channeled, but definitely there. Thank you, Ethan, Claire said once she'd seen enough. You can put your shirt down now. She made a note in her small notebook. Can you tell me how you got these bruises? And so, for the second time that morning, Ethan recounted the story of Vanessa's anger, his voice growing smaller with each detail. Claire listened intently, asking gentle clarifying questions when needed, but mostly letting him tell it in his own way. When he finished, she nodded. You've been really brave, Ethan. Really brave. I know this isn't easy. Another knock at the door revealed a woman in her 30s with a kind face and practical clothing. Hi, I'm Melissa from DCFS, she said, showing her identification badge. Claire stood to greet her. Thanks for coming, Melissa. This is Ethan. To Ethan, she explained, Melissa works for the Department of Children and Family Services. She helps find those safe places for kids that I was telling you about. Melissa smiled warmly at Ethan. It's nice to meet you, Ethan. I know things are pretty scary right now, but we're going to take good care of you. As the adults conferred quietly, Ethan sat motionless on the examination table, his small frame dwarfed by the burden of disclosure, his future suddenly as unpredictable as the storm outside. Eleanor watched him, her heart heavy with a familiar mixture of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the pain he'd endured, relief that it had finally come to light. In her 23 years, she'd seen too many Ethans, children caught in the shadows of adult failures, bearing burdens no child should carry. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, washing away the last vestiges of autumn leaves from the schoolyard. Inside, a different kind of cleansing had begun, painful but necessary, the first step on a long road to healing. For now, though, there was only the next immediate step, getting Ethan to safety. The bigger questions, how his family had reached this point, what would happen to his stepmother, how his father would respond, those would come later. For now, there was just a scared 7-year-old boy who had finally spoken his truth, and a system lurching into motion to protect him. Claire knelt in front of Ethan. We're going to go now to get you settled somewhere safe. Nurse Eleanor can come with us if you'd like. Ethan nodded, relief flashing across his face. Yes, please. Eleanor gathered her coat. Of course I'll come. As they helped Ethan into his jacket and backpack, the principal appeared at the door, her face grave. Claire stepped outside to brief her on the situation. Ethan looked up at Eleanor. Will my dad be mad at me? He asked, his voice barely audible. She chose her words with care. Your dad might have a lot of different feelings, Ethan. He might be sad or confused or even angry. Not at you, but at the situation. Adults have complicated feelings too. But what I know for sure is that your dad loves you and wants you to be safe. What if he doesn't believe me? The question pierced Eleanor's heart. Then we'll show him the bruises, she said simply. And all the other adults who do believe you will make sure you're protected. Ethan seemed to consider this. Okay, he said finally. Claire returned. Ready to go, Ethan? He took a deep breath, squared his small shoulders, and nodded. As they walked down the empty hallway, Ethan's hand found Eleanor's, his fingers cold and trembling. She gave them a gentle squeeze, a silent promise that he wasn't alone. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist. Patrol car lights painted the wet pavement in alternating flashes of blue and red, a beacon cutting through the gray October afternoon. Eleanor felt Ethan's grip tighten as they approached the cars. In 23 years, This moment had never gotten easier. Watching a child step into the unknown, their life irrevocably changed by the courage to speak up and the responsibility of adults to listen. For a moment, Ethan hesitated at the car door, looking back at the school building as if some part of him still hoped for a return to normalcy, to the morning when he was just another second grader with a stomachache. "It's going to be okay," Eleanor told him, though they both knew it wouldn't be, not right away, but someday perhaps, and that possibility was enough to help him climb into the car, carrying his red backpack and the weight of his truth into whatever came next. Chapter 2. Ripple's detective Claire Donovan had worked in the Special Victims Unit for 8 years, long enough to recognize the familiar knot that formed in her stomach whenever a case involved a child. It tightened as she watched Ethan Wheeler in her rearview mirror, his small face turned toward the window of the cruiser, eyes tracking the passing scenery with wary detachment. Eleanor Morris sat beside him in the back seat, occasionally murmuring reassurances that seemed to wash over him without penetrating. Some children cried during these rides. Others peppered her with questions about what would happen next. The quiet ones, like Ethan, worried her the most. Experience had taught her that silence often masked the deepest wounds. "We're almost there," Claire announced, turning onto Mapleton Drive, a tree-lined street of modest but well-maintained homes. The Sullivans' 2-story colonial came into view, white with navy shutters, a basketball hoop mounted above the garage, and bright yellow mums flanking the front steps despite the late season. The Sullivans were veterans in the foster care system, having welcomed dozens of emergency placements over the years. Their reputation for stability and warmth had made them Claire's first call when she'd learned Ethan would need immediate placement. "This looks like a nice house," Eleanor commented, trying to engage Ethan. He nodded slightly but said nothing, his fingers worrying at the strap of his backpack. Claire parked in the driveway and turned to face them. "The people who live here are Tom and Marie Sullivan. They have 2 kids of their own, Aiden, who's 10, and Lily, who's 5. They've helped take care of lots of kids who needed a safe place to stay." "For how long will I be here?" Ethan asked, the first words he'd spoken since leaving the school. "I don't know yet," Claire answered honestly. "It depends on what happens with the investigation and what the judge decides is best for you. But I promise to keep you updated." The front door opened, and Marie Sullivan appeared on the porch. A plump woman in her early 40s with laugh lines around her eyes and dark hair streaked with premature silver. She wore jeans, a forest green sweater, and an expression of practiced calm that balanced welcome with respect for the gravity of the situation. "Ready to go in?" Claire asked. Ethan looked to Eleanor, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I'll come in with you," she assured him. The 3 of them made their way up the stone path to the porch, where Marie stood waiting. "You must be Ethan," she said warmly, neither too enthusiastic nor too solemn. "I'm Marie. We've got a room all ready for you." Ethan offered a tentative nod but pressed closer to Eleanor's side. "And your nurse Eleanor," Marie continued. "Thank you for coming with him. Please, all of you come in. It's getting chilly out here." The interior of the house was warm and lived in, with family photos lining the stairwell and a faint scent of cinnamon in the air. A large golden retriever padded into the entryway, its tail wagging gently. "That's Copper," Marie explained, noticing Ethan's sudden interest in the dog. "He's very friendly." "Do you like dogs, Ethan?" "I've never had one," he replied softly. "Dad's allergic." "Well, Copper loves making new friends, if you'd like to pet him." After a moment's hesitation, Ethan extended his hand. The dog sniffed it politely before nudging his palm for a pat. The ghost of a smile flickered across the boy's face as he cautiously stroked the dog's head. "Why don't we all sit down in the living room?" Marie suggested. "I've made some hot chocolate and we can talk about how things will work while you're staying with us." They followed her through an archway into a comfortable living room dominated by an overstuffed sectional sofa and a wall of bookshelves. A tray with mugs of hot chocolate waited on the coffee table, alongside a plate of chocolate chip cookies that looked homemade. Ethan perched on the edge of the sofa beside Eleanor, while Claire and Marie took seats across from them. Copper flopped down at Ethan's feet with a contented sigh. "So, Ethan," Marie began, handing him a mug with careful movements. I know this is a scary day for you. When kids come to stay with us, they usually have lots of questions. It's okay to ask anything you want. He wrapped his hands around the mug but didn't drink, staring into the dark liquid as if it might contain answers. Where will I sleep? He finally asked. You'll have your own room upstairs, Marie answered. It has a twin bed with blue blankets, a desk for homework, and some books and toys. Aiden and Lily are at school right now, but they'll be home around 3:30. Aiden is in 4th grade at Oak Hill, and Lily is in kindergarten at your school, actually. What about my dad? Ethan's voice wavered slightly. Does he know where I am? Claire leaned forward. We're trying to reach him now, Ethan. As soon as we do, we'll let him know you're safe. He'll be able to visit you, but there are some things we need to sort out first. And Vanessa? The name came out barely above a whisper. The adults exchanged glances before Claire answered carefully. We need to talk to Vanessa too. Right now, our main concern is making sure you're somewhere safe while we figure everything out. Ethan nodded, his eyes still fixed on his hot chocolate. Would you like to see your room? Marie offered. You can take your cocoa with you. After receiving a reassuring nod from Eleanor, Ethan slid off the sofa, mug in hand, and followed Marie upstairs. Copper trotted after them, apparently having appointed himself Ethan's personal escort. As soon as they were out of earshot, Claire turned to Eleanor. What's your read on the situation? Eleanor sighed deeply. The bruises are deliberate, Claire. Some of them have clear fingerprint patterns, others look like impacts from an object. Possibly a belt, based on what he told me. They're in various stages of healing, suggesting this has been going on for some time. Did he mention his father being involved in the abuse? No. He was actually quite adamant that his dad doesn't know. Said the father works construction, long hours, sometimes overnight jobs. According to Ethan, the stepmother tells him they can't make dad sad because of mom dying. Classic isolation and manipulation. Claire made notes in her small leather-bound notebook. Any mention of substance abuse? Yes. Ethan referred to Vanessa drinking special juice that dad's not supposed to know about, and taking too many pills when she can't sleep. I'd say we're looking at potential alcohol and prescription drug abuse. Jesus, Claire muttered. Any other children in the home? Not that he mentioned. Small blessings. Claire checked her watch. Robert Wheeler works for Northeastern Builders according to our initial search. I've got officers trying to locate him at job sites now. The stepmother, Vanessa Wheeler, is being brought to the station for questioning. What happens next? Eleanor asked. We've got a court hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning to formalize the emergency removal. The judge will issue a temporary custody order. CPS will complete a home study and will continue our investigation, interview the father, the stepmother, teachers, neighbors. We'll need your documentation of the bruises and Ethan's disclosure. Already emailed to your department, Eleanor confirmed. I've got to say, I'm particularly concerned about the father's reaction. These cases can go either way. I know. Some parents immediately believe and protect. Others. Claire let the sentence hang unfinished. They both knew the alternative: parents who chose loyalty to a partner over the safety of their child, who convinced themselves the abuse couldn't possibly have happened, or worse, that the child somehow deserved it. I'd like to stay until Ethan's settled, Eleanor said. He seems to trust me, and this is a lot of transition for one day. Of course, I need to get back to the station, but I'll check in later. Claire gathered her things. Marie has my direct number if anything comes up. As Claire was leaving, Marie returned downstairs, her expression measured. He's exploring his room a bit. Kappa's keeping him company. That dog has a sixth sense about who needs him most. How did he seem? Eleanor asked. Quiet, watchful. He asked if he could put his clothes in the dresser, which tells me he thinks he might be here a while. Marie's experienced eyes held a wealth of understanding. I've seen that look before. A child who's been walking on eggshells, never quite sure what might trigger the next explosion. Claire nodded grimly. We'll be in touch about the hearing tomorrow. Melissa from DCFS will be here around 4 to complete the initial placement paperwork. After Claire departed, Eleanor helped Marie prepare a simple lunch of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. When they called Ethan down, he appeared at the top of the stairs, Copper still faithfully at his side. "I hope you like grilled cheese," Marie said cheerfully as he slid into a chair at the kitchen table. "It's okay," he replied, though he eyed the food with more interest than he was willing to admit. Eleanor noticed how carefully he ate, taking small, neat bites, his posture slightly rigid. "Would you like more soup, Ethan?" Marie asked when he'd emptied his bowl. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, thank you. I'm full." Eleanor and Marie exchanged a glance. They both recognized the behavior of a child who'd learned to minimize his needs, to make himself as undemanding as possible. "Well, there's plenty if you change your mind," Marie said, keeping her tone light. "And cookies for dessert if you'd like one." After lunch, Marie suggested that Ethan might like to rest or read in his room until Aiden and Lily came home from school. He agreed readily, seeming relieved at the chance to retreat to a private space. Once he was upstairs, Eleanor helped Marie with the dishes. "I should probably head back to school," she said reluctantly. "I've got students waiting, and the principal will want an update." "Of course." Marie dried her hands on a kitchen towel. "We'll take good care of him, Eleanor. This isn't our first rodeo." "I know. The Sullivans' reputation precedes you." Eleanor gathered her coat and purse. "Would it be all right if I stopped by tomorrow after school? Just to check on him? I think he'd like that." Marie walked her to the door. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Not everyone would have noticed those bruises, or gotten him to open up." "I just wish I'd noticed sooner," Eleanor admitted. The signs were there: his withdrawal, the declining academic performance, the frequent stomach aches. "I should have connected the dots earlier." "We all miss things," Marie said gently. "The important thing is that you caught it now before it got worse." Before leaving, Eleanor went upstairs to say goodbye to Ethan. She found him sitting cross-legged on the bed, a book open in his lap, Copper curled up beside him. "I need to go back to school now," she told him. "But I'll come visit you tomorrow if that's okay." He looked up, alarm flashing across his face. "You're leaving? Just for today? Marie and Tom will take good care of you, and Copper seems to have adopted you already." She smiled, indicating the dog, who thumped his tail at the mention of his name. "Will you tell the other kids where I am?" Anxiety tightened his features. "No," she assured him. "We'll just say you weren't feeling well and went home. Your privacy is important." He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Okay. Is there anything you need before I go?" He hesitated. Could you tell my dad I'm sorry?" The simple request broke something open inside Eleanor. "Oh, Ethan," she said softly. "You have nothing to be sorry for. None of this is your fault." He looked unconvinced. "But Dad will be upset." "If he's upset, it should be with the adults who didn't keep you safe, not with you." She sat on the edge of the bed. "You did exactly the right thing by telling the truth." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I miss my mom," he whispered. "My real mom. She never hurt me." Eleanor felt her own eyes grow damp. "I'm sure she was a wonderful mother who loved you very much." A tear slipped down his cheek. "I can't remember what she looks like anymore, just from pictures." "That happens sometimes, but it doesn't mean you've forgotten her. The important things, how she made you feel loved and safe, those memories stay with you." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Marie seems nice," he offered, changing the subject. "She is. And I'll be back tomorrow, I promise." After a moment's hesitation, Ethan leaned forward and gave her a quick, awkward hug. Eleanor returned it gently, careful of the bruises she knew lay hidden beneath his clothing. Robert Wheeler was in the middle of supervising a kitchen installation when the police officers arrived at the job site. Tall and solidly built, with light brown hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent considerable time outdoors, he had the distracted look of a man juggling too many responsibilities. "Mr. Wheeler?" The female officer approached him directly. "I'm Officer Jensen with the Millfield Police Department." We need to speak with you regarding your son, Ethan. Robert's expression shifted instantly from mild annoyance at the interruption to sharp concern. Ethan? What's happened? Is he hurt? Your son is physically safe, Officer Jensen assured him. However, there's been an incident that requires your immediate attention. We need you to come with us to the station. The station? Confusion and alarm battled across his face. I don't understand. Was there an accident at school? Sir, we'd prefer to discuss the details at the station. Detective Donovan is waiting to speak with you. Robert ran a hand through his hair, his mind visibly racing. Let me just tell my foreman, he said, already moving toward a man checking measurements on the other side of the kitchen. After a brief, tense conversation, he returned, keys in hand, his face set with worry. I'll follow you there. During the 15-minute drive to the Millfield police station, Robert called Vanessa repeatedly, growing increasingly frustrated when the calls went straight to voicemail. Damn it, Vanessa, where are you? He muttered after the fourth attempt. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's happened with Ethan. The police came to the job site. I'm heading to the station now. The Millfield police station was a relatively modern building of red brick and glass, designed to project both authority and community accessibility. Robert parked haphazardly in the visitor lot and strode through the front doors, his work boots leaving faint dusty imprints on the polished floor. My name is Robert Wheeler, he announced to the officer at the front desk, his voice taut with barely controlled anxiety. I was told to come here about my son, Ethan. Yes, Mr. Wheeler. Detective Donovan is expecting you. Please have a seat, and she'll be right with you. Robert remained standing, too agitated to sit. He checked his phone again. Still no response from Vanessa. He was about to try calling her again when a door opened and Detective Claire Donovan emerged. Mr. Wheeler? I'm Detective Donovan with the Special Victims Unit. Thank you for coming in. Please follow me. Special Victims Unit? Robert's face paled. What's going on? Where's my son? We'll discuss everything in my office, Claire replied calmly, leading him down a corridor to a small room furnished with a desk, several chairs, and the institutional blandness common to government buildings. Please sit down, she said, indicating a chair across from her desk. Robert remained standing. I want to know what's going on right now. Where is Ethan? Mr. Wheeler, your son is currently in emergency foster care following an incident at school today. Foster care. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Why wasn't I contacted immediately? I'm his father. Please sit down, Claire repeated, her tone firmer. This is going to be difficult to hear, and I need you to listen carefully. Something in her expression finally penetrated his panic. He sank into the chair, his large frame suddenly seeming diminished. Just tell me what's happening. Claire sat across from him, her posture professional but not unkind. This morning, the school nurse discovered significant bruising on Ethan's back while examining him for a complaint of stomach pain. When questioned, Ethan disclosed that his stepmother, Vanessa Wheeler, has been physically abusing him. Robert stared at her blankly, as if she were speaking a language he didn't understand. That's not possible. There must be some mistake. Mr. Wheeler, I've personally seen the bruises. They are extensive and in various stages of healing, indicating ongoing abuse. Some have clear fingerprint patterns consistent with grabbing. Others appear to be inflicted by an object, possibly a belt. No. Robert shook his head vehemently. No, Vanessa wouldn't. She loves Ethan. She's been a good mother to him since Lisa died. Your son has given a detailed statement describing multiple incidents of physical abuse by Mrs. Wheeler. According to Ethan, these incidents often occur when you're not home, particularly when Mrs. Wheeler has been drinking or taking medication. Robert's face cycled through disbelief, confusion, and dawning horror. This can't be happening, he murmured, more to himself than to Claire. Ethan would have told me if something was wrong. Children often don't disclose abuse, especially when they're afraid or have been told not to, Claire explained. Ethan specifically stated that Mrs. Wheeler told him not to tell you because it would make you sad, and that you were still grieving his mother's death. Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Where is he now? I need to see him. He's in a licensed foster home for the night. There will be a hearing tomorrow morning to determine temporary custody arrangements while we complete our investigation. Investigation? Robert's voice rose sharply. What investigation? He's my son. I should be taking him home right now. Mr. Wheeler, I understand this is upsetting, but we have a legal obligation to ensure Ethan's safety. At this point, we need to determine what you knew about the abuse and whether the home environment is safe for him. I didn't know anything. Robert slammed his hand on the desk. I would never let anyone hurt my son. But someone did hurt him, Claire replied steadily. Repeatedly. And you didn't notice. The words hit their mark. Robert's anger deflated, replaced by a look of stricken guilt. Oh God, he whispered, burying his face in his hands. Oh God. Claire allowed him a moment to process before continuing. Mrs. Wheeler is currently being interviewed in another room. Our officers located her at your home approximately 2 hours ago. Robert looked up sharply. She's here? I've been trying to call her. Her phone was confiscated as evidence upon her arrest. Arrest? The color drained from Robert's face. You arrested her? She's been charged with child endangerment and assault. The prosecutor will determine final charges based on our investigation. Robert stood abruptly and paced the small office. This is insane. There has to be some explanation. Ethan bruises easily. He's always falling or bumping into things. Mr. Wheeler, Claire said carefully, I've been doing this job for a long time. The bruises on your son's body are not accidental. I need to talk to Vanessa, he insisted. There's something you're not understanding. You'll have an opportunity to see her after the initial procedures are complete. Right now, I need to ask you some questions about your home situation. Robert slumped back into the chair, looking suddenly exhausted. Fine. Ask. How often are you away from home due to work? He ran a hand over his face. I don't know. A lot, I guess. We've had several big projects lately, some out of state. I've probably been gone 3 or 4 nights a week for the past few months. So Mrs. Wheeler is Ethan's primary caregiver most of the time? Yes. She works part-time as an interior design consultant, but mostly from home. She's always said she wanted to be there for Ethan. Have you noticed any changes in Ethan's behavior recently? Withdrawal, anxiety, sleep disturbances. Robert's gaze dropped to his hands. He's been quieter lately. I thought it was just him growing up, or maybe still processing his mom's death. Lisa died 2 years ago, but kids don't just get over something like that. Has Ethan ever mentioned being afraid of Mrs. Wheeler or not wanting to be left alone with her? No, never. He paused, then added hesitantly, but we don't talk as much as we used to. I've been so busy with work, trying to keep the business afloat after taking time off when Lisa was sick. Claire nodded, making notes. Are you aware of any substance abuse issues with Mrs. Wheeler? Alcohol? Prescription medications? Robert's hesitation was more pronounced this time. She had a rough time after her last miscarriage about 8 months ago. The doctor prescribed something for anxiety, I think. And yeah, she drinks sometimes, but not excessively. According to Ethan, Mrs. Wheeler drinks special juice that you're not supposed to know about and takes too many pills when she can't sleep. Robert's expression crumpled. Jesus, he breathed. I had no idea. When was the last time you saw Ethan without his shirt on? Bath time? Swimming? Changing clothes? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know. Ethan's been dressing himself for a while now, and Vanessa usually handles his baths. I can't remember the last time. His voice trailed off as the implication of his own words sank in. Mr. Wheeler, do you want to see the photographs of Ethan's injuries? He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes, I need to see. Claire opened a folder on her desk and placed several clinical photographs in front of him. They showed Ethan's back and upper arms from various angles, capturing the full extent of the bruising in stark detail. Robert's breathing turned ragged as he stared at the images. "Oh, Ethan," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. "What kind of father am I? How did I not see this?" Claire gave him a moment before gathering the photos. "Mr. Wheeler, what I need to know now is whether you're willing to take the necessary steps to protect your son." He looked up, his expression raw. "Anything. I'll do anything. That may include separating from Mrs. Wheeler, at least temporarily, and cooperating fully with our investigation and any requirements set by Child Protective Services." "I understand." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "When can I see Ethan? I need to tell him." "The hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the family court. You'll be able to see him briefly afterward, supervised by a social worker." Supervised. Pain flashed across his face. "You think I'd hurt him too?" "It's standard procedure, Mr. Wheeler. We need to assess the relationship dynamics and ensure Ethan feels safe." Robert nodded, defeated. "What do I do now?" "Go home. Get some rest. Be at the courthouse by 8:30 tomorrow morning. I suggest you contact an attorney." Claire handed him a business card. "This is my direct number if you have any questions." As he stood to leave, Robert paused. "Detective, is he okay? I mean, aside from the physical injuries, is he scared?" "He's a brave kid," Claire replied honestly. "He's concerned about you being upset with him. He asked Nurse Eleanor to tell you he's sorry." Robert's face crumpled again. "He's apologizing to me?" The irony wasn't lost on him. God, what a mess. After Robert left, Claire returned to her desk and reviewed her notes from the day's interviews. The threads of the case were forming a familiar pattern. A child silenced by fear and misplaced loyalty. An abuser with personal demons. A parent who'd failed to see what was happening right under his nose. The question now was whether Robert Wheeler would step up to protect his son, or whether his own guilt and attachment to Vanessa would cloud his judgment. Claire had seen both scenarios play out countless times over the years. She hoped, for Ethan's sake, that his father would make the right choice. Vanessa Wheeler sat in the small interrogation room, her slender arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. At 35, she still possessed the polished beauty that had initially attracted Robert. High cheekbones, smooth skin, and honey blonde hair currently pulled back in a messy ponytail. But stress and substance abuse had begun to leave their marks. Shadows beneath her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands, the pinched look of someone perpetually bracing for impact. "Mrs. Wheeler," Detective Eric Molinari said, sliding a cup of water across the table toward her. "We'd like to hear your side of the story regarding the injuries discovered on your stepson, Ethan." "I've already told the other officers," she replied, her voice tight. "I don't know what happened to Ethan. Kids get bruises all the time. He's clumsy. He falls." Eric glanced at the case file open before him. "The bruises documented by the school nurse and our medical examiner are consistent with intentional infliction, not accidental falls." "Well, they're wrong." Vanessa took a sip of water, her hand shaking slightly. "I would never hurt Ethan. I love him like he's my own." According to Ethan, you frequently grab him hard enough to leave bruises and have struck him with a belt on multiple occasions. He also mentioned being pushed against a wall, resulting in a head injury. Vanessa's face flushed. "He's lying. He's been difficult since his mother died. He resents me for taking her place." "Mrs. Wheeler, we have photographic evidence of extensive bruising that corroborates Ethan's account." "So what? Bruises don't tell you who caused them." Her voice rose slightly. "Maybe he did it to himself. Maybe he's trying to get attention." Eric's expression remained neutral. "Are you suggesting that a 7-year-old child inflicted multiple bruises on his own back? Or that he's fabricating abuse to get attention?" Vanessa's defensive posture faltered slightly. "I'm just saying there could be explanations you haven't considered. Ethan also mentioned that you drink special juice, that his father doesn't know about, and take pills when you can't sleep. Can you elaborate on that?" Her eyes widened fractionally. "I occasionally have a glass of wine. and I have a prescription for anxiety. That's hardly a crime. Do you take your medication as prescribed? She hesitated. Yes. And how much do you typically drink in a day? I don't know. A glass or two of wine. What does this have to do with anything? Eric made a note in the file. Mrs. Wheeler, we've obtained a warrant to search your home. The officers have reported finding multiple empty vodka bottles hidden in the laundry room and bathroom, as well as 3 different prescription medications in your name, all with warnings not to combine with alcohol. Vanessa's composure cracked visibly. You had no right to go through my things. We had a warrant, Mrs. Wheeler. Legal and proper. Eric leaned forward slightly. I think what's happening here is clear. You're struggling with substance abuse issues that are affecting your behavior. When under the influence, you become violent with Ethan. That's not true, she protested, though her conviction seemed to be waning. Neighbors reported hearing you shouting at Ethan on multiple occasions. His teacher has documented a significant decline in his academic performance and social engagement over the past 6 months. And most importantly, Ethan himself has disclosed the abuse in detail. Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes. You don't understand. Being a stepmother is impossible. He hates me. He compares everything I do to his precious real mother. I'm trying so hard, and Robert's never there. And so you're admitting to hurting him? Eric pressed. No, I mean... She wrapped her arms more tightly around herself. There might have been times when I was too rough, when I grabbed him too hard. But I didn't mean to hurt him. I was just so frustrated and tired. And Robert doesn't see how hard it is. What about the belt, Mrs. Wheeler? Did you use a belt on Ethan? A tear slid down her cheek. Once or twice, when he was really misbehaving. That's how I was raised. Spare the rod, spoil the child. And pushing him against the wall? She looked away. It was an accident. I didn't mean for him to hit his head. Eric nodded, keeping his expression neutral, despite the familiar disgust that rose whenever an abuser began making excuses. Mrs. Wheeler, based on your statements and the evidence we've collected, you're being charged with child endangerment and assault. You'll be held overnight for arraignment tomorrow morning. You're arresting me? Panic flared in her eyes. But what about Robert? What about my home? Mr. Wheeler has been informed of the situation. As for your home, that will depend on the outcome of the hearing tomorrow and the ongoing investigation. As Officer Jensen entered to escort Vanessa to processing, she asked in a small voice, "Can I see Robert? Please." "After processing, you'll be allowed a phone call," Eric replied. "Whether Mr. Wheeler chooses to take that call is up to him." After Vanessa was led away, Eric joined Claire in the observation room where she'd been watching the interview. "Classic deflection and minimization," Claire commented, followed by the inevitable pivot to excuses once confronted with evidence. Eric nodded grimly. "Did you notice how quickly she went from, 'I didn't do it,' to 'it wasn't that bad' to 'he deserved it'? Textbook." Claire gathered her notes. "How did it go with the father?" "Shocked. Devastated. Maybe genuinely unaware. It's hard to tell at this point. These cases get messy when the non-abusing parent has to choose between their child and their partner." "I know. And with a deceased mother in the mix, there's even more emotional complication." Claire checked her watch. "I'm going to head back to the Sullivans to check on Ethan before calling it a day. The DCFS worker should be there by now. I'll finish the paperwork for the arraignment." Eric stretched his neck, working out the tension of the day. "What's your gut feeling on this one, Claire? Think the father will step up?" She considered the question. "Hard to say. He seemed genuinely blindsided. But there's a lot of guilt there, and guilt can make people double down on bad choices rather than face their failures. For the kid's sake, I hope he makes the right call." "Me too," Claire agreed, gathering her jacket. "But hope isn't a strategy. We've got to build this case solid enough that it doesn't matter what Robert Wheeler decides to do." As she drove to the Sullivans' house, Claire reflected on the day's events. These cases always left her feeling drained, navigating the murky waters of family dysfunction while trying to protect the most vulnerable. The law provided the framework, but the human element remained unpredictable. The rain had returned, a steady drizzle that blurred the street lights just beginning to illuminate the early evening. Claire thought of Ethan, adapting to yet another disruption in his young life. She couldn't fix everything that had gone wrong for him, but she could make sure he didn't face it alone. Eleanor Morris sat in her car outside Pinewood Elementary, gathering her thoughts before heading back inside. The afternoon had stretched into early evening, with crisis meetings, documentation, and concerned calls from staff who'd heard rumors about Ethan's sudden departure. Principal Diana Garcia had been supportive but concerned about potential liability. The school guidance counselor had suggested a session with Ethan's classmates to address any questions without violating his privacy. Sarah Bennett, Ethan's teacher, had spent an hour in Eleanor's office, tearfully reviewing every interaction she could remember, searching for missed warning signs. Through it all, Eleanor had maintained her professional composure. But now, alone in her car with the rain pattering on the roof, she allowed herself a moment of grief. For Ethan. For the childhood he should have had. For the mother he'd lost and the father who'd failed to protect him. Her phone chimed with a text message from her husband. "Dinner in the oven. Love you." The simple domestic kindness brought tears to her eyes. After 25 years of marriage, Michael still knew exactly when she needed those small reminders of normalcy and care. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and headed back into the school for her final meeting of the day. Tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges. The court hearing, visiting Ethan, facing the inevitable questions from colleagues who would sense something significant had happened. Inside the building, the hallways were quiet. The classrooms darkened except for the occasional teacher working late. Eleanor gathered the files she needed from her office and made her way to the conference room where Diana Garcia was waiting. "Eleanor," Diana greeted her, rising from her seat at the head of the table. At 53, the principal carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd navigated countless school crises over a 20-year career. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," Eleanor replied, settling into a chair. "How about you? I know this puts the school in a difficult position." Diana waved away the concern. "The school will be fine. I'm more worried about Ethan. And you. These cases take a toll." "I've seen worse," Eleanor said, though they both knew that didn't make it easier. "I've contacted the district's legal team," Diana explained, shifting into professional mode. "They'll want statements from you and Sarah, documenting when you first noticed concerns and the specific disclosures Ethan made today." Eleanor nodded. "I've already prepared most of that documentation. Detective Donovan has copies as well." "Good." Diana hesitated. "There's another matter we need to discuss. Robert Wheeler serves on the PDA fundraising committee. He's well-liked, well-connected in the community. Once this becomes public, people will take sides," Eleanor finished for her. "They always do." "Exactly. And given that his first wife, Ethan's mother, was also active in the school before her illness." Diana sighed. "Lisa Wheeler chaired the Fall Festival for 3 years. People remember her fondly. Which means some will resist believing anything negative about the family she left behind," Eleanor concluded. "Even if it means dismissing Ethan's injuries. We need to present a united front as a staff. Child safety comes first, period." Diana's tone left no room for debate. "I'm meeting with the teachers tomorrow morning before class. I won't share details, but I'll make our position clear." "Thank you." Eleanor appreciated Diana's decisiveness, especially knowing that some school administrators might prioritize political considerations or community relationships over a clear ethical stance. "One more thing," Diana added, her expression softening slightly. "Whatever happens with the court hearing tomorrow, Ethan's place at Pinewood is secure. I've already spoken with the superintendent about ensuring continuity in his education, regardless of where he's placed temporarily." The simple assurance of stability, at least in one aspect of Ethan's life, touched Eleanor deeply. "That will mean a lot to him," she said. "He loves Ms. Bennett's class, despite everything." Their meeting concluded shortly after, with Diana promising to handle any media inquiries that might arise and Eleanor agreeing to provide updates as appropriate while respecting confidentiality requirements. As Eleanor finally headed home, exhaustion settled over her like a heavy blanket. The weight of the day, of Ethan's trust, of the system's limitations, of the long road ahead, pressed down on her shoulders. But beneath the fatigue lay a quiet conviction that they had done the right thing, the necessary thing, the only thing possible when faced with a child suffering. The rain had stopped by the time she pulled into her driveway, leaving behind a world washed clean, glistening under streetlights. Inside, she found Michael in the kitchen, reading glasses perched on his nose as he graded papers at the dining table. After 30 years of teaching high school English, he still insisted on handwritten comments for his students' essays. He looked up as she entered, taking in her exhausted expression with the perceptiveness of long partnership. Without a word, he stood and enfolded her in an embrace that allowed her professional composure to finally crumble. She leaned into his solid warmth, letting the tears come. "Bad one?" he asked softly into her hair. She nodded against his shoulder. 7-year-old. Stepmother. The usual tragic story with different names. He didn't offer platitudes or solutions, just held her until the worst of the emotion had passed. Then he guided her to the table where he'd kept dinner warm and poured her a glass of wine. "Tell me," he said simply, and so she did, releasing the details she'd held contained behind professional boundaries all day. Michael listened attentively, his face reflecting anger, sorrow, and the resigned understanding of someone who'd heard too many similar stories over decades of teaching. When she finished, he reached across the table to take her hand. "You made a difference today," he reminded her. "Whatever happens next, you saw what others missed and you acted. That matters." Eleanor squeezed his hand gratefully. "I just hope it's enough." At the Sullivans' house, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with Aiden and Lily, pushing peas around his plate while the siblings chattered about their day at school. Tom Sullivan, a gentle giant of a man with salt and pepper beard and patient eyes, observed the newcomer carefully while maintaining a conversation with his children about an upcoming science fair. Melissa Chun from DCFS had completed her initial assessment and paperwork an hour earlier, confirming the emergency placement and reviewing expectations with the Sullivans. Tom and Marie had done this dozens of times before, but each child brought unique challenges, unique wounds. "Ethan," Marie said, noticing his barely touched dinner, "would you prefer something else to eat? Maybe a sandwich?" He glanced up, startled by the attention. "No, thank you. This is fine." As if to prove it, he took a deliberate bite of chicken. "I hate peas too," 5-year-old Lily announced with the solemn wisdom of childhood. "Dad says I have to eat 5. You should eat 5 too." The simple, matter-of-fact suggestion made Ethan's lips twitch in what might have been the ghost of a smile. He carefully counted out 5 peas and ate them under Lily's approving gaze. "Good job," she declared. "Now you can have dessert. We have ice cream." "Lily," Marie gently intervened, "Ethan can have dessert whether he eats his peas or not. In this house, food isn't about rewards or punishments." The deliberate message wasn't lost on Ethan, whose eyes darted to Marie's face with a flash of surprise. After dinner, while Marie supervised Lily's bath, Tom invited Ethan to join him and Aiden for their nightly ritual of walking copper around the block. "No pressure," Tom assured him when Ethan hesitated. "You can stay inside if you prefer. Marie will be here with Lily." "I'll come," Ethan decided after a moment, perhaps drawn by Kappa's enthusiastic tail wagging at the mention of a walk. The October evening was cool but clear, the earlier rain leaving behind puddles that reflected the streetlights. Tom kept the conversation light as they walked, letting Aiden do most of the talking about school, friends, and an upcoming soccer tournament. He noticed how Ethan stayed slightly behind them, one hand resting on Kappa's back as if the physical connection provided some essential comfort. At one point, they passed a house where raised voices could be heard through an open window, a typical family disagreement over homework or chores. Tom observed how Ethan's shoulders immediately tensed, his stride faltering. "Sounds like the Richardsons are having one of their debates again," Tom commented casually. Joey and his dad always get worked up about basketball teams. The deliberate normalization seemed to help. Ethan's posture relaxed slightly, though he remained watchful. When they returned to the house, Marie had finished bathing Lily and was helping her into pajamas adorned with cartoon dinosaurs. The domestic scene, warm, gentle, utterly normal, stood in stark contrast to whatever Ethan had become accustomed to. "Bath time for you next, Aiden," Marie announced. "Ethan, would you like a bath or shower tonight? The bathroom attached to your room has both options." The question seemed to catch him off guard. "I can wait until tomorrow," he offered quickly. Marie exchanged a glance with Tom. "You're welcome to wait if you prefer, but there's plenty of hot water if you'd like to clean up tonight." Ethan hesitated, then admitted in a small voice, "I don't have any pajamas." "Oh," Marie's expression softened. "I should have mentioned we keep extras for our guests. I put some in your dresser earlier. Blue ones that should fit you perfectly." The relief on his face was palpable. "Then, maybe a shower? If that's okay." "Of course it's okay," Tom assured him. "There are fresh towels in the bathroom cabinet. Just call if you need anything." While Ethan and Aiden took turns in their respective bathrooms, Tom and Marie tucked Lily into bed with her customary 3 stories and ritual of checking the closet for monsters. A ceremony Lily insisted upon despite her repeated assurances that she knew monsters weren't real. "It's just to make them feel better, Dad," she had once explained with exaggerated patience. "The monsters get scared at night too." Afterward, Tom found Ethan perched tentatively on the edge of his bed, hair damp from the shower, drowning slightly in the blue pajamas that were a size too large. Copper had already claimed a spot at the foot of the bed, clearly having appointed himself Ethan's official guardian. "Comfortable?" Tom asked from the doorway. Ethan nodded. "Thank you for letting me stay here." The simple gratitude for what should have been a basic right, a safe place to sleep, squeezed Tom's heart. After fostering more than 30 children over 12 years, he still found himself caught off guard by these moments of stark perspective. "We're glad you're here," he said simply. "Do you need anything else tonight? Water? Another pillow? A nightlight?" Ethan shook his head, then paused. "Actually, is it okay if Copper stays?" "That's entirely up to Copper," Tom replied with a smile. "And it looks like he's already made his decision." As if to confirm this assessment, the golden retriever sighed contentedly and settled more firmly against Ethan's legs. "If you need anything during the night, our room is just down the hall. The door with the blue ceramic sign that says, Tom and Marie. Don't hesitate to knock, no matter what time it is." Ethan nodded again, though Tom suspected the boy would endure almost anything before disturbing them. After Tom left, Ethan lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the strange house settle around him. The day's events replayed in his mind: Nurse Eleanor's gentle questions, Detective Claire's kind but serious expressions, the surreal ride in the police car, the Sullivans' warm but overwhelming welcome. He wondered what his father was doing now, whether he was angry, whether Vanessa had convinced him, as she'd always threatened, that Ethan was a liar, a troublemaker, a burden. Beside him, Copper shifted in his sleep, one paw coming to rest against Ethan's leg. The simple, warm weight of it was oddly comforting. Ethan tentatively placed his hand on the dog's soft fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan fell asleep without the knot of anxiety that had become his constant companion. The fear of footsteps in the hallway, of raised voices, of making some small, unpredictable mistake that would ignite Vanessa's temper. Instead, he drifted into slumber with his hand still resting on Copper's fur, the rhythm of the dog's breathing a gentle lullaby that carried him into dreams untainted by fear. Robert Wheeler sat in his darkened kitchen, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the table before him, surrounded by the remnants of the life he'd thought he was building. Family photos lined the refrigerator, Ethan's school picture from first grade, a candid shot of Vanessa laughing at a backyard barbecue last summer, the 3 of them posing awkwardly at Ethan's 7th birthday party. The images mocked him now, showcasing moments of apparent normality that had disguised a terrible reality. After leaving the police station, He'd driven home in a daze, walking through the front door with the strange sensation of entering a crime scene. The house looked exactly as it always did. Tidy living room with its beige sectional sofa, Ethan's backpack hook empty by the door, the slight scent of the cinnamon candles Vanessa favored. Yet everything was irrevocably altered by what he now knew. He'd moved through the rooms like a ghost, seeing them with new eyes. In Ethan's bedroom, he'd noticed things he'd overlooked before. How the toys were arranged with suspicious precision. How the bookshelf contained the same books that had been there a year ago despite Ethan's love of reading. How the space felt impersonal and unlived in, like a display rather than a child's sanctuary. In the master bathroom, he'd opened the cabinets and found what the police had already discovered. Empty vodka bottles hidden behind cleaning supplies, prescription bottles with various dates and dosages. Evidence of a secret life happening right alongside the one he thought he was sharing. Now, hours later, he remained at the kitchen table, trying to piece together how he'd missed so much, how he'd failed so completely at the one job that mattered most, protecting his son. The phone call with Vanessa from the jail had been brief and terrible. She'd alternated between tearful pleas for him to bail her out and bitter accusations that Ethan was manipulating everyone, that the police were overreacting, that he was betraying her by even considering that she might have hurt his precious son. "He's been trying to come between us from the beginning," she'd insisted, her voice taking on the sharp edge he now recognized as the marker of her intoxication. "He never gave me a chance. And now he's made up these lies because he knows you'll always choose him." For a terrible moment, he'd almost wavered, almost let himself believe that there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. Then the detective's words had echoed in his mind. "I've personally seen the bruises." The photographs flashed before his eyes. His son's small back mottled with evidence of cruelty he couldn't deny. "I have to go," he'd told Vanessa abruptly. "The attorney will contact you tomorrow." He'd hung up on her protests, turned off his phone, and poured himself the whiskey that now sat before him, mostly untouched. The alcohol held no appeal. He couldn't bear the thought of dulling his senses when that very failure had already cost so much. Robert ran his hands over his face, feeling the stubble that had accumulated throughout this endless day. His mind kept circling back to a moment 3 weeks ago. He'd come home late from a job site, expecting to find Ethan already asleep. Instead, he'd discovered his son still awake, sitting on the edge of his bed in the dark. "Hey, buddy," he'd said, surprised. "Everything okay?" Ethan had looked up, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Dad, can I tell you something?" But before Ethan could continue, Vanessa had appeared in the doorway. "Robert, you're finally home." "Ethan, I told you to go to sleep an hour ago. Your father's tired and doesn't need to deal with your stalling tactics." Ethan had immediately withdrawn, shoulders hunching. "Sorry, it wasn't important." Robert had kissed his son goodnight and followed Vanessa to their bedroom, too exhausted to question the interaction. Now, with agonizing clarity, he wondered what Ethan had been trying to tell him that night, what opportunity he'd missed to prevent what followed. A tentative knock at the back door startled him from his thoughts. Through the glass pane, he could see his next-door neighbor, Jim Calloway, standing on the deck with concern etched on his weathered face. Robert hesitated, then walked over to open the door. "Jim." "Robert." The older man nodded. "Saw your lights on. Thought I'd check if you're okay. There were police cars here earlier." The simple query broke through Robert's isolation. "No," he admitted, his voice rough. "I'm not okay, Jim. Nothing's okay." Jim took in Robert's haggard appearance and the untouched whiskey on the table. "Want to talk about it? Or want company while you don't talk about it?" The unexpected offer of companionship, uncomplicated, undemanding, was almost more than Robert could bear. "They took Ethan," he said, the words catching in his throat. "Child Protective Services. They say Vanessa's been hurting him. Badly. And I didn't know. I didn't see it." Understanding dawned in Jim's eyes, followed by a sorrow that held no judgment. As a retired emergency room nurse, he'd seen his share of family tragedies. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's sit on the deck." Fresh air helps when the world's closing in. They settled into the wooden Adirondack chairs that faced the small backyard where Ethan had once played, before the nightmares, before the stomachaches that kept him home from school, before the quiet withdrawal that Robert had attributed to normal development. "I should have known," Robert said after a long silence. "There were signs. God, there were so many signs." Jim didn't contradict him or offer empty reassurances. "Probably," he agreed quietly. "But beating yourself up won't help Ethan now. What matters is what you do next." "I don't even know if I'll get him back," Robert admitted, the fear that had been lurking beneath his guilt finally surfacing. "The hearing's tomorrow. They'll decide about temporary custody. What if they think I'm unfit? What if they're right?" "You're his father," Jim said simply. "You made mistakes. Now you fight for the chance to do better." He paused, then added, "I know something about this, Robert. My daughter went through a rough patch years ago. Drugs. Lost custody of my grandson for 6 months. Hardest time of our lives. But she got clean, did the work, and they're both thriving now." The parallel wasn't exact, but the underlying message resonated. Families could heal, could rebuild after devastating failures. It offered a thin thread of hope in the darkness that had engulfed Robert's world. "I don't know what to do," he confessed. "Every instinct says to protect Vanessa, to find some explanation that makes this all a mistake. We've been together for almost 2 years. I thought—" He trailed off, the weight of his misplaced trust too heavy to articulate. "The heart's a stubborn thing," Jim acknowledged. "But when it comes down to it, your job is to protect your child. Everything else, including your marriage, comes second." The blunt assessment cut through Robert's confusion with the clarity of undeniable truth. Whatever complicated feelings he had for Vanessa, whatever explanations or justifications might exist, his primary responsibility was to Ethan. Had always been to Ethan. "You're right," he said, the words both painful and liberating. "I just hope I haven't realized it too late." They sat in companionable silence as the night deepened around them, the distant sound of traffic a reminder of a world continuing its normal rhythms while Robert's had been irreparably altered. Tomorrow would bring the court hearing, the first step in a process that would determine whether he could rebuild what had been broken. His son's trust, his family's future, his own sense of what it meant to be a father. For now, though, there was just the cool October night, the steady presence of a neighbor who'd seen enough of life's tragedies to know that judgment was less useful than simple human connection, and the painful but necessary recognition of terrible truths that could no longer be denied. As midnight approached, Jim finally stood to leave. "Try to get some sleep," he advised. "Tomorrow will be hard enough without exhaustion making it worse." Robert nodded, knowing sleep would likely prove elusive but appreciating the practical counsel. "Thanks, Jim, for coming over, for listening." "That's what neighbors do," Jim replied with a slight shrug. "And Robert, kids are resilient, more than we give them credit for. Ethan's going to need you to be strong now, but don't count him out. With the right support, children can recover from almost anything." The words offered a fragile comfort as Robert finally made his way upstairs to the bedroom he'd shared with Vanessa, now haunted by questions about who she really was and how he could have been so blind. He couldn't bear to sleep there tonight. Instead, he grabbed a blanket and pillow and made his way to Ethan's room. Sitting on the edge of his son's neatly made bed, surrounded by carefully arranged possessions that now seemed more like props in a performance of normalcy than evidence of a happy childhood, Robert finally allowed himself to weep, for Ethan's pain, for his own failures, and for the long, uncertain road ahead. Chapter 3. Crossroads. The Millfield County Courthouse stood at the center of town, its red brick facade and white columns a testament to small-town permanence amid changing times. On this Wednesday morning, a fine mist hung in the air, not quite rain but enough to blur the edges of buildings and soften the harsh lines of the world. People hurried up the wide stone steps, collars turned up against the damp chill, their breath forming small clouds that dissipated into the October gloom. Inside Family Court Room 3, the atmosphere was one of hushed tension. Unlike the imposing formality of criminal proceedings, Family Court operated with a more subdued gravity, the stakes no less high, but the setting designed to be less intimidating, particularly for the children whose futures were decided within these walls. Judge Patricia Keating, a woman in her early 60s with steel-gray hair and attentive eyes behind rimless glasses, had presided over Millfield County Family Court for nearly 2 decades. She'd seen thousands of cases, custody disputes, adoption proceedings, termination of parental rights, but never grew callous to the human drama unfolding before her bench. Each case represented lives at crossroads, families in crisis, children caught in circumstances beyond their control. This morning's emergency hearing for the temporary placement of Ethan Wheeler was one of 5 cases on her docket, but she'd reviewed the preliminary reports with particular attention, noting the detailed documentation provided by Eleanor Morris and Detective Donovan. The photographs of Ethan's injuries had caused her to pause her review, closing the file for a moment to steel herself against the familiar surge of controlled anger that such evidence invariably provoked. Now, as the courtroom filled for the 9 a.m. session, she observed the various parties taking their places with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read volumes in posture, proximity, and eye contact. Robert Wheeler sat beside his hastily retained attorney, Michael Fernandez, a respected family law practitioner known for his pragmatic approach. Robert's rumpled shirt and the dark circles beneath his eyes spoke of a sleepless night. He clutched a manila folder as if it contained life-saving instructions, his gaze darting nervously around the room. On the opposite side, Assistant District Attorney Sophia Martinez conferred quietly with Detective Claire Donovan and Melissa Chun from DCFS. The 3 women formed a unit of professional solidarity, their expressions serious but not unkind. Vanessa Wheeler had been brought from the holding facility, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that emphasized the pallor of her face. Her court-appointed attorney, James Levinson, leaned close to her, speaking in hushed tones that she appeared to barely register. Without makeup and in the standard-issue blue jumpsuit provided to detainees, she looked smaller somehow, stripped of the careful presentation that had been part of her identity. In a separate area sat Tom and Marie Sullivan, who had brought Ethan to the courthouse as directed. The boy himself waited in a child-friendly room down the hall with a court-appointed advocate, sheltered from the direct proceedings until and unless his presence was specifically requested. Eleanor Morris slipped into the courtroom just as the bailiff called for all to rise, taking a seat in the row behind Detective Donovan. She'd taken a personal day from school, unable to focus on routine duties when Ethan's future hung in the balance. "Good morning," Judge Keating began after settling behind the bench. "We're here for the emergency placement hearing regarding Ethan Wheeler, age 7. I've reviewed the report submitted by the Department of Children and Family Services, the Millfield Police Department, and Pinewood Elementary School. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that the sole purpose of today's proceeding is to determine the safest temporary placement for the child, while the investigation continues and more permanent arrangements can be considered." She surveyed the room, making brief eye contact with each of the key participants. "This is not a criminal trial, nor is it a final custody determination. Those proceedings will follow in due course. Today's decision is focused exclusively on Ethan's immediate safety and well-being. Is that understood by all parties?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the courtroom. "Very well. Ms. Martinez, please present the state's position." Sophia Martinez rose, her crisp navy suit and contained demeanor reflecting years of handling sensitive cases involving children. At 38, she developed a reputation for thoroughness without unnecessary dramatics, understanding that the facts in these cases were typically dramatic enough without embellishment. "Your Honor, the state is requesting that Ethan Wheeler remain in temporary protective custody with the current foster placement, the Sullivan family, who are present in the courtroom today. This request is based on several factors." She outlined the evidence methodically: Eleanor's discovery of the bruising, Ethan's disclosure of repeated physical abuse by his stepmother, the photographic documentation, the preliminary medical evaluation that had confirmed the injuries were consistent with intentional infliction rather than accidental trauma, and Vanessa Wheeler's partial admission during police questioning. "Additionally, Your Honor, we have concerns about Mr. Wheeler's ability to provide adequate protection at this time. While he appears to have been unaware of the abuse, this itself raises questions about his supervision and involvement in his son's daily care. Furthermore, Mr. Wheeler and Mrs. Wheeler share a residence, and Mrs. Wheeler would be returning to that residence if released on bail. Robert stiffened visibly at these words, leaning to whisper something to his attorney, who placed a restraining hand on his arm. The state recognizes the importance of parent-child relationships, Martinez continued, and is not suggesting permanent separation. We are recommending supervised visitation for Mr. Wheeler while a more thorough assessment is conducted and a safety plan developed. Our goal, as always, is family reunification when and if that can be accomplished without risk to the child. She concluded by requesting that Vanessa Wheeler be prohibited from any contact with Ethan pending the resolution of the criminal charges against her, and that Robert Wheeler be required to participate in parenting classes and a psychological evaluation before any consideration of reunification. Judge Keating nodded, making notes. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Fernandez, your response on behalf of Mr. Wheeler. Michael Fernandez rose, straightening his tie with a practiced gesture. Your Honor, while my client understands the gravity of the situation and the state's obligation to ensure Ethan's safety, we believe that removing him from his father's care is an unnecessarily traumatic step that serves neither Ethan's emotional well-being nor the state's interest in family preservation. He paused, allowing the judge to absorb this framing before continuing. Mr. Wheeler was, as the state acknowledges, unaware of any mistreatment of his son. Upon being informed of the allegations and shown evidence, he has demonstrated nothing but cooperation with authorities and commitment to his son's welfare. Fernandez produced several documents from his briefcase. We have here a sworn statement from Mr. Wheeler that he has initiated divorce proceedings against Vanessa Wheeler and has obtained a temporary restraining order prohibiting her from entering the family home. Additionally, Mr. Wheeler has already enrolled in a parenting class recommended by DCFS and has arranged for flexible work scheduling to ensure he can be more present in his son's daily life. Robert's proactive steps appeared to catch Martinez slightly off guard. She accepted the copies Fernandez handed across the aisle with a professionally neutral expression that nevertheless betrayed a hint of reassessment. Furthermore, Fernandez continued, Mr. Wheeler has arranged for his sister, Catherine Wheeler, to temporarily relocate from Boston to assist with Ethan's care. Ms. Wheeler is a licensed elementary school teacher with no criminal history and no involvement in the current situation. She has already taken a leave of absence from her position and will arrive this afternoon. He produced another document. We have her affidavit here, along with her teaching credentials and a character reference from her principal. Judge Keating accepted the additional paperwork, reviewing it with careful attention. This is certainly comprehensive preparation, Mr. Fernandez. When did Mr. Wheeler make these arrangements? Yesterday evening and this morning, Your Honor. My client has not wasted a moment in creating conditions that would allow Ethan to return home safely. Robert's desperate efficiency spoke volumes about both his love for his son and his growing recognition of how significantly he had failed in his protective role. The judge's expression remained neutral, but she nodded slightly, acknowledging the effort if not yet endorsing its adequacy. Given these substantial steps, Fernandez concluded, we request that Ethan be returned to his father's custody today, with appropriate oversight from DCFS and any additional conditions the court deems necessary. Continued separation will only compound the trauma Ethan has already experienced. Judge Keating turned to James Levinson, Vanessa's attorney. Mr. Levinson, does your client wish to address the court regarding the temporary placement of her stepson? Levinson conferred briefly with Vanessa before standing. Your Honor, at this time, Mrs. Wheeler will reserve comment on the placement issue while the criminal charges against her are pending. However, I am instructed to state for the record that she denies the characterization of her actions as presented by the state and maintains that many of Ethan's injuries were accidental or self-inflicted during behavioral episodes. A ripple of tension moved through the courtroom at this partial denial, which contradicted Vanessa's earlier admissions to Detective Molinari. Robert's face flushed with anger, his hands clenching into fists beneath the table. Judge Keating's expression revealed nothing as she made another note. Thank you, Mr. Levinson. Ms. Chun, what is the position of the Department of Children and Family Services? Melissa Chun stood, her practical suit and minimal jewelry reflecting the pragmatic approach of someone who balanced idealism with the realities of an overloaded system. Your Honor, DCFS acknowledges Mr. Wheeler's swift action to create safer conditions for Ethan's potential return. However, we would prefer a more graduated approach than immediate full custody. She outlined a compromise position, a trial period of daytime visits progressing to overnight stays, with continued monitoring and support services. This would allow Ethan time to process recent events and for Mr. Wheeler to demonstrate his commitment to the proposed changes in a supervised context before full reunification. Judge Keating considered this middle ground thoughtfully. Before making my determination, I'd like to hear from Detective Donovan regarding her assessment of the home situation and Mr. Wheeler's awareness of the alleged abuse. Claire stood, her testimony precise and factual. She described Robert's apparent shock upon learning of the abuse, his immediate acceptance of the photographic evidence despite initial disbelief, and the subsequent search of the Wheeler home that had revealed hidden alcohol containers and prescription medications in quantities suggesting substance abuse. In my professional assessment, she concluded, Mr. Wheeler appears to have been genuinely unaware of the abuse, though this lack of awareness itself resulted from a pattern of absence and delegation of parental responsibilities that created the conditions in which abuse could occur and remain undetected. Judge Keating thanked her and turned to the final critical voice. Nurse Morris, as the mandated reporter who initiated this case and the person who obtained Ethan's initial disclosure, do you have any insights to offer regarding his needs at this juncture? Eleanor's heart quickened as she rose. She hadn't expected to be called upon directly. Your Honor, in my 23 years as a school nurse, I've unfortunately encountered many cases of child abuse. Ethan's disclosure was consistent with a child who has been experiencing ongoing mistreatment but retains strong emotional bonds with his father. She paused, choosing her words with care. Ethan expressed fear of disappointing his father and concern for his father's emotional well-being, which suggests a relationship worth preserving. However, he also demonstrated the hypervigilance and anxiety typical of children living in unpredictable and frightening circumstances. The judge leaned forward slightly. In your professional opinion, what would best serve Ethan's emotional needs during this transitional period? Eleanor felt the weight of the question. Her answer could significantly influence a decision that would shape Ethan's immediate future. She glanced briefly at Robert, whose expression held a mixture of hope and dread, before returning her attention to the judge. Ethan needs consistency, safety, and time to regain his sense of security, she said finally. Abrupt transitions, even back to his father whom he clearly loves, might be destabilizing after the significant disruption he's already experienced. I believe a gradual approach with strong support services, as Ms. Chen suggested, would give Ethan the best chance to process these events in a healthy way. Judge Keating nodded, thanking Eleanor before gathering her notes for a final review. The courtroom fell silent, the collective breath held as she considered her ruling. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, she began at last, I find that immediate return to Mr. Wheeler's full custody would be premature, despite his commendable efforts to create a safer home environment. However, I also recognize the importance of maintaining the father-son relationship and beginning the reunification process without unnecessary delay. She outlined her decision with characteristic clarity. Ethan would remain with the Sullivan family for a minimum of 2 weeks, during which Robert would have daily supervised visits, gradually increasing in duration. Catherine Wheeler would be approved as an additional support person once DCFS had completed a background check. After the initial 2-week period, overnight visits could begin if all parties were progressing well, with a follow-up hearing scheduled for 30 days hence to reassess the situation. Additionally, she continued, Mr. Wheeler will complete the parenting classes he has enrolled in, participate in family therapy with Ethan once a therapist deems it appropriate, and maintain the restraining order against Mrs. Wheeler. Mrs. Wheeler is prohibited from any contact with Ethan pending resolution of the criminal charges. With a final rap of her gavel, Judge Keating concluded the hearing, already turning her attention to the next case on her docket. The machinery of family court continued its steady rhythm, processing human pain and possibility with bureaucratic efficiency tempered by genuine concern. As the courtroom began to empty, Robert approached Eleanor, his attorney hovering protectively nearby. Nurse Morris, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for what you did for Ethan, for seeing what I didn't see. The simple acknowledgement, free from defensiveness or denial, surprised her. Mr. Wheeler, please call me Robert. He swallowed hard. Can you tell me, is he okay? I mean, beyond the physical injuries. Is he managing? The naked vulnerability in his question touched Eleanor deeply. He's a resilient boy, she answered carefully. The Sullivans are experienced foster parents with a gentle approach. He seemed to be settling in well when I left him yesterday. Robert nodded, blinking rapidly. I'm seeing him this afternoon, for the first supervised visit. I don't know what to say to him, how to even begin to make this right. Eleanor considered her response thoughtfully. In my experience, children don't need perfect explanations. They need honesty, reassurance of their own blamelessness, and concrete evidence that things will be different going forward. She paused, then added, and sometimes they just need their parent to be fully present with them, without distraction or agenda, to really see them. A look of painful recognition crossed Robert's face. I haven't been very good at that, he admitted quietly. Always thinking about the next job, the next bill, running from my own grief after Lisa died. I let Ethan down in so many ways. You have an opportunity now, Eleanor said gently, not to erase what happened, but to build something better moving forward. Before Robert could respond, his attorney touched his elbow. We should go, Fernandez murmured. We still need to prepare for your visit with Ethan. With a nod of thanks to Eleanor, Robert allowed himself to be guided away, his shoulders carrying the visible weight of regret and tentative hope. Claire approached as Eleanor gathered her things. Well, that went about as well as could be expected, the detective commented. Judge Keating's known for her measured approach. The gradual reunification plan makes sense. I just hope it gives Ethan what he needs, Eleanor replied. He's been through so much already. They all have, Claire observed, glancing at Robert's retreating back. The real work's just beginning. The children's waiting room at the courthouse had been designed with careful attention to creating a safe, comforting space amid institutional surroundings. Colorful murals adorned walls that elsewhere in the building remained austere beige. Bookshelves offered well-worn favorites for various ages. A small table held paper and crayons, and a corner nook with cushions provided a retreat for children who needed quiet. Ethan sat at the activity table, methodically coloring a picture of a dinosaur, his meticulous attention to staying within the lines revealing more about his state of mind than any words could have conveyed. Beside him, Lisa Okafor, the court-appointed special advocate assigned to his case, maintained a reassuring presence while respecting his need for space. At 42, Lisa had spent 15 years as a CASA volunteer, representing the interests of children caught in the court system. Her calm demeanor and genuine respect for children's autonomy had made her particularly effective with those who, like Ethan, had learned to be wary of adult attention. That's coming along nicely, she commented, indicating his drawing. You're very precise with your coloring. Ethan glanced up briefly. Vanessa says messy work shows a messy mind. Lisa noted the comment without visible reaction, though mentally she added it to her growing file of observations about the household dynamics. Everyone has their own style, she offered neutrally. Some artists are very precise, others more free-flowing. Both can create beautiful things. He seemed to consider this novel perspective, adding another careful stroke of green to the dinosaur's back. Is the meeting over? He asked, his tone deliberately casual though his grip on the crayon tightened slightly. Yes, it just finished, Lisa confirmed. The judge has made her decision about where you'll be staying for now. His hand stilled. And you'll continue staying with the Sullivans for a little while longer, but you'll get to see your dad regularly. In fact, he's coming to visit you this afternoon. Ethan's expression remained guarded. At the Sullivans' house? Yes, I'll be there too, just to help make sure everything goes smoothly. He returned to his coloring, pressing harder with the crayon. Does my dad know what I said? About Vanessa? Yes, he does, Lisa answered honestly. He knows about the bruises and what you told Nurse Eleanor. Is he mad at me? The question emerged in a whisper, the crayon now motionless in his hand. No, Ethan. He's not mad at you. He's sad that you were hurt, and that he didn't know about it sooner so he could protect you. But he's not mad at you at all. The boy absorbed this information with the careful consideration of a child who had learned to analyze adult reactions for his own safety. What about Vanessa? Will she be there too? No. Vanessa won't be at the visit. And the judge has said that she can't see you right now. Relief flickered across his face before he mastered it. Okay. Lisa watched him resume coloring, noting the slight easing of tension in his small shoulders. The Sullivans are waiting outside whenever you're ready to go. There's no rush if you'd like to finish your picture. Ethan surveyed his work critically. It's done, he decided, carefully setting down the crayon and writing his name in the corner with precise block letters. As they prepared to leave, he suddenly turned to Lisa. Will I ever go home again? He asked, the directness of the question belying the complexity of emotions behind it. Lisa crouched to his level, maintaining eye contact without crowding him. The judge has asked everyone to work together to make it possible for you to go home to your dad when it's safe. That might take a little time, but yes, that's the plan. With Vanessa too? The wariness returned to his expression. No, Lisa said clearly. Your dad has told the court that Vanessa won't be living in your home anymore. Ethan digested the significant information, his face revealing the complicated mix of relief, guilt, and uncertainty that such a major family reconfiguration evoked, even when it was clearly necessary. Dad will be all alone, he observed quietly. He'll have you, Lisa reminded him gently. And I understand your Aunt Catherine is coming to stay for a while too. Aunt Katie? The first genuine animation lit his features. Really? That's what your dad arranged. She's arriving today. The mention of his father's proactive step to bring a trusted family member into the situation visibly reassured Ethan in a way that abstract promises of safety could not. For the first time that morning, Lisa glimpsed the child beneath the carefully constructed facade of compliance. A glimpse of the natural enthusiasm and trust that deserved the chance to flourish again. Robert Wheeler paced the small office where he waited for his scheduled visitation, anxiety radiating from him in almost visible waves. The DCFS visitation room attempted warmth with its neutral-toned paint and generic framed landscapes, but the institutional furniture and observation window maintained the unmistakable atmosphere of surveillance and evaluation. Lisa Okafor had briefed him briefly before bringing Ethan in, setting expectations, offering guidance on how to approach this first supervised interaction, emphasizing the importance of honesty without burdening Ethan with adult concerns. Children often blame themselves for family disruptions, she'd explained. Even when they've been mistreated, they may feel guilty for causing trouble by disclosing abuse. It's critical that you reassure Ethan this isn't his fault and that he did exactly the right thing by telling the truth. Robert had nodded, desperately trying to absorb every piece of advice, terrified of making this harder for his son than it already was. When the door finally opened and Ethan entered, Robert's carefully rehearsed greetings evaporated. His son looked simultaneously so familiar and so changed. Still the same brown hair that needed trimming, the same serious eyes, but carrying himself with a new wariness that broke Robert's heart. Hey, buddy, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, uncertainty evident in his posture. Hi, Dad. The awkward distance between them, physical and emotional, felt like a chasm. Robert fought the urge to rush forward and sweep his son into an embrace, remembering Lisa's caution to let Ethan set the pace of physical contact. It's really good to see you, Robert said instead, gesturing to the small couch. Want to sit down? I brought something for us to do together if you want. He indicated a box on the coffee table, a Lego set featuring a wildlife rescue vehicle. Building with Lego had been their ritual once, before Robert's work schedule had intensified and Vanessa had begun complaining about the mess. Ethan approached cautiously, glancing at the box with a flicker of interest. That looks cool. I thought maybe we could start it here and then continue when you come home. Robert caught himself, hastily adding, "When the judge says it's okay for you to come home, I mean." They settled on opposite ends of the couch, Lisa taking a seat in the corner of the room, present but giving them as much privacy as the supervised situation allowed. As they opened the box and sorted the colorful bricks, a tentative conversation began to flow. Robert asked about the Sullivan family, listening attentively as Ethan described their house, the golden retriever that had appointed himself Ethan's special companion, and the simple routines that structured his days there. "They have rules, but they're different," Ethan explained, carefully attaching wheels to the vehicle's base. "Like, if you spill something, they just help you clean it up. They don't even yell." The casual observation landed like a blow to Robert's chest. A glimpse into how different his son's experience at home had been from what he believed. That's how it should be," he said carefully. "Accidents happen. They're not a reason to yell at someone." Ethan looked up, studying his father's face. "Vanessa said you'd be mad about the mess if you knew." Robert set down the Lego piece he was holding, needing his full concentration for this critical moment. "Ethan, I need to tell you something really important, okay? I am not mad at you. Not about anything that happened with Vanessa. Not about telling Nurse Eleanor the truth. Not about any of this. The only person I'm mad at is myself, for not protecting you better." Ethan's fingers fidgeted with a small brick. "She said you wouldn't believe me." "She was wrong," Robert stated firmly. "I believe you completely, and I'm so sorry you were hurt and afraid in our home. That should never have happened." "Is she coming back?" The question emerged barely above a whisper. "No," Robert said decisively. "Vanessa will not be living with us again. Ever. I promise you that." Ethan's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Okay." They returned to building the Lego vehicle, the activity providing a framework for connection that pure conversation might have made too intense. As they worked together, Ethan gradually edged closer on the couch, the physical distance between them diminishing organically. "Aunt Katie's coming to stay with us for a while," Robert mentioned, carefully attaching a tiny window to the model. "She's excited to see you." "Lisa told me," Ethan nodded. "I haven't seen her since Christmas. She's taking time off from her teaching job in Boston. She'll be here for as long as we need her." The mention of this concrete support appeared to reassure Ethan further. "She makes good pancakes," he observed, the mundane detail somehow profoundly moving in its normalcy. "The best," Robert agreed, smiling despite the persistent ache in his chest. "Way better than mine." A ghost of a smile flickered across Ethan's face. "Yours always stick to the pan." "Every single time," Robert acknowledged ruefully. "It's like they're superglued." The tiny shared joke, insignificant in any other context, felt like a monumental victory, a slender thread of their former relationship surviving amid the wreckage. As their visit continued, Robert found himself studying his son with new eyes, noticing details he'd previously overlooked. The careful way Ethan organized the Lego pieces before using them, his tendency to flinch slightly at sudden movements, the habitual scanning of the room that spoke of a child accustomed to monitoring his environment for threats. "The Sullivans seem nice," Robert said as their time together began drawing to a close. Ethan nodded. "They are. Copper, that's their dog, sleeps on my bed. Is that okay?" The hesitant request for permission even for this small comfort twisted inside Robert. "Of course it's okay. Dogs know good people when they meet them." "Will I?" Ethan hesitated, then forged ahead. "Will I come home soon?" Robert chose his words with care. "The judge wants us to have visits first so we can get used to being together again. Then, when everyone feels ready, you'll start spending some nights at home too. And eventually, when things are all settled, you'll come home for good." "How long will that take?" "I'm not sure exactly," Robert admitted, "but I promise I'm doing everything I can to make our home safe and happy for you. And until then, I'll visit you every day that I'm allowed to." Ethan seemed to accept this honest but incomplete answer, returning his attention to the nearly completed Lego model. "We did a good job," he observed, turning the vehicle to examine it from all angles. "We did," Robert agreed, recognizing the metaphorical significance of their collaborative creation. something new and functional built from scattered pieces. You know what? Why don't you keep this with you at the Sullivans? And maybe we can start another one next time I visit. Really? Ethan looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Really? Consider it the first of many Dad and Ethan projects. When Lisa gently indicated that their time was ending, Robert fought back the urge to protest, to beg for more minutes with his son. Instead, he forced himself to model the calm acceptance of boundaries that he hoped to instill. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon, he promised. Maybe we can start on that Mars rover set I saw in the store. Ethan nodded, carefully picking up the completed rescue vehicle. Okay. As they prepared to part, Robert crouched to his son's eye level. Can I have a hug goodbye? It's completely okay if you'd rather not. Ethan hesitated only briefly before stepping forward into his father's careful embrace. Robert held him gently, consciously restraining himself from clutching too tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his child's hair, feeling the delicate shoulder blades beneath his palms and thinking of the bruises hidden under the fabric. I love you, Ethan, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. More than anything in the world. Love you too, Dad, came the quiet reply. As Ethan left with Lisa, Robert remained kneeling on the institutional carpet, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been damaged and what now needed rebuilding. The visit had gone better than he'd feared, but laid bare how much ground they needed to recover. He was still sitting there, lost in thought, when Melissa Chun entered the room. Mr. Wheeler? How are you doing? He rose stiffly, wiping surreptitiously at his eyes. I'm okay. It was good to see him. Melissa nodded understanding. The first visit is always the hardest. Ethan seemed comfortable with you, which is a positive sign. He's so careful, Robert observed, the realization coming into focus as he spoke it aloud. Watching for reactions, measuring his words. No kid should have to calculate like that. Children are adaptive, Melissa replied. They develop survival strategies in difficult situations. With consistency and safety, those hypervigilant behaviors gradually fade. How long before he feels normal again, like he doesn't have to be on guard all the time? That varies greatly from child to child, she answered honestly. But the foundation you're laying now, showing up reliably, creating safety, demonstrating that his needs matter, that's exactly what will help him heal. Robert nodded, gathering his composure. What happens now? With the case, we'll continue with the visitation schedule as outlined by Judge Keating. I'll be conducting a home assessment once your sister arrives and you've had time to make the changes you discussed. And we'll be referring Ethan for trauma-focused therapy, which you'll participate in as well when the therapist recommends it. The comprehensive nature of the intervention, the formalized process that would now govern his relationship with his own son, felt simultaneously invasive and reassuring. The system that had removed Ethan from his care was also providing a structured path back to reunification. Whatever it takes, he said simply. I'll do whatever it takes. Vanessa Wheeler sat in the holding cell at the county jail, waiting for her attorney to return with news of her bail hearing. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on her slender frame, the harsh fluorescent lighting emphasizing the shadows beneath her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as withdrawal from alcohol and anxiety medication began to take hold. The past 24 hours had shattered the careful facade she'd maintained. The image of the devoted stepmother stepping in to help a grieving widower raise his son, the competent homemaker managing a household while maintaining her part-time design career, the supportive wife understanding of her husband's demanding work schedule. Now, stripped of makeup, designer clothes, and the numbing buffer of vodka and Xanax, she faced the unvarnished reality of what she'd done and who she'd become. The memories she'd blurred with substance abuse returned with terrible clarity. Ethan flinching as she grabbed his arm too hard, her palm striking his face when he'd spilled juice on the kitchen floor, the belt she'd used when he'd talked back to her during one of her migraines, the sickening thud as he'd hit the wall when she'd pushed him for entering her home office without permission. She justified each incident differently. Discipline, accident, necessary lesson. But sitting in the sterile cell, she could no longer hide from the pattern they formed together. Nor could she deny the dark satisfaction she'd sometimes felt in those moments of power over a child who represented everything she couldn't have. Robert's complete love, the biological connection to him she'd failed to achieve despite 2 miscarriages, the uncomplicated belonging in a family she'd always craved. The sound of the cell door opening jolted her from these uncomfortable reflections. James Levinson entered, his expression revealing nothing as he took a seat on the bench beside her. "The bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning," he informed her. "Given the nature of the charges and your lack of prior criminal record, there's a good chance the judge will set bail at an amount you can manage, particularly if we can demonstrate you have a stable place to stay that isn't the family home." Vanessa nodded mechanically. "My sister's in Hartford. I could stay with her." "Good. That's helpful." Levinson made a note in his legal pad. "Now, regarding the child placement hearing this morning, Robert has initiated divorce proceedings and obtained a restraining order against you. The judge has ruled that Ethan will remain in foster care temporarily, with a plan for gradual reunification with his father." Each statement landed like a physical blow, though none came as a genuine surprise. Still, the clinical confirmation of her marriage's collapse and her complete excision from Ethan's life left her momentarily breathless. "Did Robert say anything?" she asked finally. "About me? I mean," Levinson's expression softened slightly with something like pity. "Mrs. Wheeler, I think you need to prepare yourself for the reality that your husband has made his choice. His actions this morning were unequivocal. He's choosing his son." "Of course he is," she murmured, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "Saint Robert, the devoted father. Never mind that he was barely home, that he left me to handle everything while he buried himself in work." "That may well be true," Levinson acknowledged, "but it doesn't change the legal situation we're facing. The question now is how to proceed with your defense against these criminal charges." Vanessa stared at the blank wall opposite her. "What are my options?" "We have several potential approaches." Levinson laid out the possibilities with professional detachment. "We could pursue a not guilty plea, challenging the prosecution's evidence and presenting alternative explanations for Ethan's injuries. This would mean a full trial." "What are the chances of winning?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Levinson hesitated. "Given the photographic evidence, Ethan's testimony, and your own partial admissions to Detective Molinari, limited." She nodded, unsurprised. "What else?" "We could seek a plea agreement. First-time offender, potential substance abuse and mental health factors. The prosecutor might consider reduced charges in exchange for a guilty plea, mandatory treatment and parenting classes." "And prison time?" "Some likely, but potentially less than you'd face if convicted at trial." He paused, studying her face. "There's also the possibility of an insanity or diminished capacity defense, given what you've shared about your mental state following the miscarriages and your medication use." Vanessa laughed hollowly. "So my choices are to claim I didn't do it when everyone knows I did, to admit I did it but promise to do better, or to argue that I was too crazy to know what I was doing?" Levinson didn't flinch at her harsh summary. Legal defenses often sound reductive when stated plainly, but essentially, yes. She fell silent, considering these unappealing options. For a moment, she felt the familiar urge to blame others. Robert for his absences, Ethan for his constant needs and comparisons to his sainted mother, the doctors who'd failed to save her pregnancies. But beneath that reflexive deflection lay a newer, rawer awareness that she had done this. Her hands, her choices, her responsibility. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, we have until tomorrow's bail hearing to discuss strategy." Levinson gathered his notes. "Is there anything else you need for now?" Vanessa shook her head, then reconsidered. "Is there any way to get a message to Robert? Just to say I'm sorry." Given the restraining order, any communication would need to go through attorneys. "I can speak with Mr. Fernandez if you'd like, though I should caution that such outreach might not be well received at this stage." "Never mind," she murmured. "It wouldn't change anything anyway." After Levinson left, Vanessa remained motionless on the hard bench, feeling the walls of consequences closing in around her. The legal jeopardy she faced was daunting enough, but the personal devastation felt more absolute. The irrevocable loss of the family she tried so desperately to claim as her own. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. In her determination to control Ethan, to mold him into a child who would validate her role as his mother, she had effectively guaranteed she would never be a mother to anyone. As the reality of her situation sank in, Vanessa Wheeler did something she hadn't done since childhood. She prayed. Not for escape from consequences or for Robert's forgiveness, but for something more fundamental, the strength to finally face the truth about herself. "Are you sure about this?" Claire Donovan asked, eyeing the manila folder on her desk with skepticism. "These cases can drag on for months, sometimes years. It might be better to step back now that the emergency response is complete." Eleanor Morris shook her head firmly. "I'm sure. Ethan trusts me. I want to continue being a consistent presence for him throughout this process." They sat in Claire's small office at the police station, reviewing the documentation from the morning's hearing. Outside, the routine business of law enforcement continued. Officers filing reports, phones ringing, the perpetual hum of a system processing human conflict at all levels. "It won't be easy," Claire warned. "The CASA program requires significant training and time commitment. Plus, you already have a full-time job. I've spoken with Principal Garcia. She's supportive of me adjusting my hours to accommodate CASA responsibilities." Eleanor's expression remained resolute. "I've been thinking about this for years, actually. Ethan's case just made the decision clear." Claire studied her thoughtfully. "You've always gone above and beyond for the kids who come through your office. And yet it never feels like enough," Eleanor admitted. "I patch them up, document their injuries, make the mandated reports, and then they disappear back into the system. I never know if they got the help they needed, if anything actually changed. That's why you want to become a court-appointed special advocate? To see the process through." "Exactly. To be a consistent voice for children like Ethan when they're surrounded by rotating professionals and competing interests." She tapped the CASA application materials. "I know I can't save every child, but maybe I can make a real difference for a few." Claire nodded understanding. "You'd be excellent at it. The kids lucky enough to get you as their advocate will have a fierce ally." "I hope so." Eleanor gathered the application. "In the meantime, I've arranged to visit Ethan at the Sullivans after school tomorrow. The court approved it as a supportive connection." "How did he seem at the courthouse?" "I only saw him briefly." Eleanor considered the question. "Guarded, watchful, but also, perhaps a bit more centered than yesterday. The Sullivans know what they're doing, and that dog of theirs is better therapy than most professionals I've encountered." "Animals can sense vulnerability," Claire agreed. "My sister's a trauma therapist who uses therapy dogs in her practice. She says they build bridges where human connection is too threatening." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Detective Molinari entered, carrying a tablet. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to see this right away. The forensic team just sent over their analysis of Vanessa Wheeler's phone." Claire took the tablet, scanning the report with Eleanor looking over her shoulder. "What am I looking at, Eric?" "Scroll to the media files folder," he directed. "There's a hidden album." Claire navigated to the indicated location, then drew in a sharp breath. On the screen were dozens of images and short videos, meticulously dated and organized. All of Ethan, all documenting injuries or incidents of punishment. "My God," Eleanor murmured, her professional composure momentarily cracking. "She was recording the abuse?" "It appears so," Eric confirmed grimly. "Some of the videos show her administering the so-called discipline. Others are just recordings of the aftermath, bruises, marks. In several, she's narrating as if creating evidence of Ethan's supposed misbehavior and her supposedly justified response." Claire scrolled through several of the files, her expression hardening with each image. She created a documentation system for her own abuse. The level of premeditation here changes things significantly. "The DA's office will want to see these immediately," Eric agreed. "It strengthens the case for the more serious charges." "What about Robert?" Eleanor asked. Do these files indicate any knowledge or participation on his part? Eric shook his head. Not from what we've reviewed so far. In fact, in several recordings, she explicitly mentions waiting until he's gone or hiding evidence before he returns home. Claire set the tablet down, rubbing her temples. I've seen a lot in this job, but this kind of calculated documentation still manages to surprise me. It's almost as if she wanted to be caught eventually, or she needed to convince herself she was justified. Eleanor suggested quietly, creating a record to reinforce her own narrative. The three fell silent, each processing the implications of this disturbing discovery. For Eleanor, it reinforced her determination to stay involved in Ethan's case, to ensure that this evidence of systematic abuse translated into the long-term support and protection he would need to recover. I should go, she said finally, rising from her chair. I have the CASA orientation session this evening. Claire nodded. I'll keep you updated on developments that might affect Ethan, within the bounds of what I can legally share. As Eleanor left the police station, the late afternoon sun broke through the persistent October clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The beauty of the golden light seemed incongruous with the darkness she'd just witnessed in those digital files. Yet it offered a faint reminder that even in the most troubling circumstances, moments of clarity and illumination could emerge. She thought of Ethan, building Lego with his father in the visitation room, taking those tentative first steps toward healing a relationship fractured by betrayal and neglect. She thought of Robert, finally facing the consequences of his emotional absence, seemingly committed to the difficult work of becoming the father his son deserved. She even thought of Vanessa, now confronting the reality of her actions without the buffer of substances or self-deception. The path forward would not be simple or straight for any of them. Healing rarely followed a predictable trajectory, especially from wounds as deep as those Ethan had suffered. But today had brought the first fragile signs that healing was possible, that the shadows that had enveloped this family might eventually yield to light. Eleanor started her car, mentally preparing for the CASA orientation that would mark the beginning of her expanded commitment to children navigating the complexities of the legal system. As she drove away from the police station, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a conviction that even the darkest circumstances could be transformed through persistent care and unwavering advocacy. For Ethan, and for the children who would follow, she would be that steady presence, that consistent voice insisting that their needs mattered, their futures mattered, they mattered. In a system often overwhelmed by caseloads and constrained by resources, she would stand firmly in the gap, helping to ensure that children like Ethan wouldn't fall through the cracks or be reduced to file numbers. It wasn't a solution to the broader societal issues that contributed to child abuse, but it was something tangible, something real, a commitment to walk alongside those who needed an ally most. And for today, for this moment, it was enough to move forward with hope.